Shalom and welcome to another Chamor podcast from Bay Abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. This channel is mostly comprised of recordings from live shows like this one, which are raw, unedited, and often unprepared. At least I can say they're always without script. There is an idea which I will have talked about with people. And I would think, okay, I think I've got a basic view on that, a basic grasp, and I think I'll record something for the audience out there who are interested in hearing something real, something raw, something unprepared, something scruffy, something which is not just clipped and trimmed and made to perfect for an audience who want always just something image. They're always interested in image, and they're not interested in real, raw thinking, unedited, and dangerous content. So that's what this channel promotes. And because of that, I say things which are offensive. I say things which are dangerous, things which later I think, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. I could have found a better way to say that. But that's how a natural, raw conversation is. And it's always easier if you have somebody else to talk to than if you're just sort of spouting off your head, as I do in these shows, raw information as it occurs to me. So anyway, today's topic is going to be eating the rich. And that's a provocative title. I don't know if you know what that means. I will explain where that comes from. It's a common phrase, eat the rich. And what does it mean? It scares people when you talk about this because it sounds like we're talking about some kind of revolutionaries whose plan is to overthrow the wealthy and cannibalize them, literally. Well, it doesn't mean that, but it can mean that if we're not careful. And I want to talk about how that can come about and how it is going to come about inevitably if we're not careful. It can be in a very horrific way. And if we are careful and clever, then it will come about in a positive way, and it won't be scary for us. Eating the rich in the biblical sense is from the book of Revelations when it talks about come. The angel calls to the birds of the air and the animals of the field and says, "Come, eat the flesh of kings and mighty men." And that's at the very end when they're kind of dealing with the armies of Gog and Magog. So it is something which is prophesied to happen as well. And the birds which are refer to the souls of the believers, but we don't have to go into that in too much detail. So first of all, we have to talk about the situation we're living in right now, where they say that 5%, or in some places they say it's even the 1%, are dominating the planet or dominating the country, and the 95% of the planet are struggling. We are literally in a kind of a techno-feudalism where the lords control the territory. That might not be a physical territory anymore. It might be a virtual territory. It might be businesses. It might be something like that. They control the wealth, and the rest of us are peasants, dependent upon our liege lords and the mercy that they're going to show to us. So that's basically we're in that area. We're in that time now, techno-feudalism. Now, in techno-feudalism, feudalism that relies upon the ignorance and the illiteracy of peasants, okay? And in real feudal times, the peasants knew that they were illiterate. They were aware of their flaw, of their difficulty, and learning to read and write was something that they saw was the way out of their predicament. They wanted to learn to read and write. It was something which was often denied to them, and people spoke in a Latin language a lot of the time, so that it was sort of like a closed system. They couldn't learn. If they did learn to read and write, they didn't know Latin, and so they couldn't really break into the what can we say, break through that sort of what we call it today. We'd call it like a glass ceiling. There's a kind of when you're trying to get promoted up to a ladder of professionalism, there's a glass ceiling for some people who can never break through that glass ceiling, and other people break through. But there's this invisible barrier which you can't break through. And so using the Latin language and ensuring that the majority of people were illiterate was how the feudal lords controlled the peasants in the olden days. But as I said, those peasants knew that there was a problem. They knew that they had to learn Latin. They knew that they had to learn to read and write. and that would definitely improve their situation. Also, there was the problem with printing press. There weren't printed materials around. People could not spread ideas as easily as the rich, who could control, writing on parchment and getting hold of paper, which was very expensive in those days. So now, these days, you'll think, well, we're nothing like that. We're not in the same situation. We don't have the same conditions as the olden days. How can you call us in a kind of a techno-feudalism? Well, the reason is because the language, there are a few. There is a direct correlation, but we have to learn what is the Latin language of the day, what is the reading and writing of the day, and then you'll have a better idea. So the wealth is still clear. We can see who the wealthy are, the 5%, and 95% is everybody else. But the language, what is the Latin language of the modern day, which enforces techno-feudalism? Well, that is really sort of like a computer language, computer sciences. So you can learn some things, but if you can't code, then you are definitely left behind. That's number one. And I don't mean just using coding programs where you already have lines of code written for you. I mean being able to look at lines of code and understand what it is you're reading, as if it's just me speaking to you right now. That's a kind of a number one. But number two is actually media literacy. Okay, if you are illiterate concerning the media, I mean, people know that they can't read and write. Okay, they know that they can say, okay, I can't read and write code. That's difficult. I don't understand it. It's a different language for me. But they don't feel like they have to. But another side of it is media literacy. Media literacy is severely is the real serious problem right now. The real serious problem with the world right now is media literacy. People are media illiterate, and unlike the olden days when you had in the feudal society, those people who were illiterate and couldn't read and write knew that they couldn't read and write, knew that they didn't know Latin language. People who are media illiterate and don't understand like the psych speak, which people use, neurolinguistic programming, hypnosis, language persuade, they don't understand what's being presented to them. Those people are worse off than peasants in the feudal times, in the old feudal times, because the peasants in the old feudal times knew that they didn't speak Latin and knew that they couldn't read and write. Well, the people who are media illiterate think they're fine. They don't see any problem with their knowledge, with their ability. They think that they know enough. They're media savvy enough. They can read and write. They understand what's going on. They don't realize that if you are media illiterate, you are at extreme disadvantage towards in comparison with those people who are media literate. Now, I did media and culture as part of my degree course, so I'm slightly more media literate than most people, but I should have done multimedia communication. That would have been something which would have helped better to be media literate. And despite being media literate in the sense that I did media and culture as part of my degree, in my humanities degree, I recognized always that I was behind on other people who had the computer science and the multimedia communication sort of abilities and things like that. Now, what about the majority of people who don't do those subjects? Well, you are in serious, deep doo-doo. You're in serious trouble because you don't have a clue what it is that people are using to communicate with each other and keep you as a peasant, basically, as an uneducated, illiterate peasant, to be exploited. That's a problem number one, and so that literacy issue is problem number one. As I said, problem number two is that you don't even realize that you're illiterate. You don't even know where you can pick up a book to start learning how to be media literate. You don't even know who you can communicate with, where you can find a club of people who are learning how to be media literate and read the media around them. You think that everything is just social media and the journalists are doing their jobs and that's all fine. You don't realize that you're being manipulated every day in your news feed with things like whether you're on YouTube, what videos are being recommended to you, whether you're on Facebook, what comes into your feed, whether it's Twitter feed, whether it's they call it X feed now, whether it's a TikTok feed. It doesn't matter, whether it's just Google pages. When you open up a Google page and it's got like recommendations before you type in what you want to search, that news which comes up, those articles which come at the bottom, all of this is part of the way of exploiting your media illiteracy. It's all about exploiting your media illiteracy. You, the illiterate peasant in the techno-feudal society, are being exploited. And one day, let me say, I should actually, before we get into one day, this will continue until you are all, the 95%, are all on 0 hours contracts with very little pay, hanging around waiting for work, basically, as bondsmen. Okay, bondsmen, because the contract makes you into a bondsman. Okay, men and women, but the term is bondsman. Okay, so you will all be bondsmen with these 0 hour contracts, unable to get jobs anywhere else, dependent upon the company that you've signed your 0 hours contract with, the companies which will control the law, because the legal cases will be found and precedents will be set in favor of those companies which can afford to drag out a legal case forever and ever when you can't afford to even take a case to court. And as the governments are shrinking and shrinking down, because currently the illiterate peasants of the techno-feudal society are actually voting for their liege lords to take control of their lives and giving up their rights to the liege lords. By that time, the governments will be so small, there'll be no public funding for you to be able to take any of these people to court. So court becomes the domain of the rich. Being able to fight for your legal rights is something that only the rich can do, and the poor have no other option except to be oppressed or have a revolution. Now, this is the problem. This is where the eating the rich becomes one of two ways. When you have a revolution, there is always a redistribution of power, a redistribution of wealth. There's always a redistribution of both of these things when there's a revolution. If you have the correct kind of revolution, if revolution goes the right way, then you can end up with a decent society at the end of it. But if revolution goes the wrong way, which is more likely to do, like 90% chance it's going to go the wrong way, you'll end up going into a dark age. If it's managed poorly and ends up not going into a dark age, which happened in the Russian Revolution, for example, you'll end up having millions of people starving to death while the system is being set in place, which is basically what the Holodomor was in Ukraine and Kuban and Kazakhstan. The southern parts of Russian Empire suffered a massive famine, and people starved to death, just because they needed to redistribute the food across the society to keep everybody alive. And when they had hundreds of millions of people to deal with, losing the lives of 5 million people was not considered a big loss. Okay, it's like it's collateral damage, if you like. Not an ideal situation, but that's what happens. These people didn't have any experience of how to manage a transition from Russian imperialism to industrialized modern society. They didn't have there was no qualification available in that. So they were basically finding their way as they went along, and they make massive mistakes. And sure, it came out at the end with an industrialized modern Russia, but in the process, millions of people had to die because they were not managing properly. They didn't know how to do it. And that's a positive scenario. That's a good outcome. Similar situation happened with Mao Zedong in China. Similar situation. And I'm saying these are the positive outcomes. If it's not managed and consciously sort of directed, as it was in those two cases, it's going to be much, much worse. And when people don't realize that there is a system which can be followed, a way can be followed and improved upon by learning and studying, okay, how did the Russian Revolution work? How did the Chinese Revolution work? What were their mistakes? How did they, end up with all these people dying? If you don't improve upon that, if you just have a mindless revolution, then it will end up with cannibalization of people in the streets. There will be absolute utter chaos. This happened once before, of course. This happened in the Dark Ages, and there will be another Dark Age if we don't plan the revolution properly and get prepared for the revolution properly, because it's going to happen. Inevitably, it's going to happen. The stronger that the capitalism is getting, it will happen. It's not going to happen. just because somebody has found some algorithms which can control the population. Eventually, the population will realize that they are being duped by the technocrats, that the techno-feudalism is a real thing, and that they are media illiterate, and that they are being exploited because they are media illiterate. Currently, people don't realize that, but when they realize that, then they will be angry. They'll be angry against technology in general, and there will be if it's, as I'm saying, if it's not a controlled and studied and prepared for revolution, it'll be a wild, mindless revolution of a bunch of people who are angry about technology and will be, I say, what we call them Luddites, a kind of a Luddite revolution, which will result in a dark age full of disease, poverty, famine. There will be a dark age full of raiders and cannibals. Yes, if you're living in a city, you will be cannibalized because there's no food to grow in a city. There's not enough food to support a city. Get out of the cities if that happens, because that's where the cannibalization, the physical cannibalization is really going to happen. It's going to happen a lot there. And when those cannibals in the cities have finished eating everybody in the city and finished eating each other, and maybe some kind of hierarchy sort of emerges amongst the cannibals who survived in the city, they will be going into the countryside to raid the countryside. And they probably will initially just start eating people in the countryside as well. And eventually they'll learn that probably it's best to keep these people alive because they can have more than just one kind of meat if they allow these countryside people to farm and do have their cattle and their sheep and their pigs and various things like that. They'll think, well, we can have more than one kind of meat all the time because eating human meat is not nutritious. It's not a nutritious thing to do. So you will end up with plenty of diseases if you go down that path, which is what the city ignorant people will do. And they will be, first of all, cannibalizing the rich in the cities. That's what will be, first of all, happening if we don't have this carefully planned out revolution, which must be prepared for and studied in order to do better than China and Russia did when they had their revolutions. It's not that it's not going to happen if we don't think about it. It is going to happen, just one way or another. It's either going to happen in a controlled way, or it's going to happen in a completely uncontrolled, dark, futuristic way. It's going to happen. It doesn't matter how much time it takes to get there. Eventually, people will realize that they are being exploited by the 5%, and they have been exploited so much. And the gap between rich and poor is going to be so massive, so insanely massive, that it will result in a revolution. They will use robots and various things to try and control you. First, it's algorithms and the media, which they can control in your feed and isolate you from other people. But eventually, there will be physical robots which will be controlling people, and you'll have to sort of deal with that too. But it's not impossible that the 95% can overthrow the robots too. I mean, at the end of the day, these are machines. If they became too autonomous, then the people who've created these machines will also be facing the same dangers that everybody else, that the machines will take over, and then the rich will be in the same predicament as everybody else. But anyway, no matter how long it takes for this revolution to happen, it's going to happen, as I said, either in a prepared way and be led by people who have studied and worked out how they need to take the reins of this and direct it to prevent like a dark age from taking over, or it'll be happening in a way which will result in a new dark age. That's a suspicion against technology and absolute chaos among the population, leading to the opposite of techno-feudalism, basically just simple, straightforward, barbaric feudalism, where you have your barbaric type, Viking type lords of these citadel cities who've, after eating each other and establishing a hierarchy of themselves, will eventually go out and learning that it's better not to eat the people in the countryside, but basically make the people in the countryside work for them. You'll be back into full-on Norman-type feudalism, as it used to be in the early days of the Norman sort of reigns across Europe. So techno-feudalism will result in a dark age followed by old-style medieval feudalism, unless we learn to deal with this. So as I said, this is a biblical prophecy as well. the birds of the air, the beasts of the field will come and eat the flesh of kings and mighty men. That's what's going to happen when the total end comes. And how can we, what should we do to prepare for this? And what would society be like if we can avoid that revolution? How will it have to go? Well, it's not going to be very attractive to you, because the way that the algorithms have programmed you to be for the past, well, if you're a millennial, you're in total trouble because you've grown up with that being programmed into you. And for the rest of us who are older than that, who have had a consciousness before, say, the internet age, will have to come to terms with the fact that we have been corrupted by this time, by the false information, the false ideas. Let's go back to the 1980s. Okay, we'll take you back in time to the 1980s. Now, in the 1980s, it was a funny time. It was an odd time. Okay, but at that time, in the United Kingdom at least, things were not too bad. We had a very strong, very good health service. We had very good pension. We had a lot of a good support network for the vulnerable, whether they were widows, orphans, or disabled people. There was a good system in place. But there was a problem with the system in place. It was a basically good system, but Thatcherism had taken over and was starting to make the rich jealous of their international counterparts. Okay, international counterparts. If you were a doctor in the UK, maybe making something like £50,000 in the UK, which was a good salary, very, very good salary. It's a good salary today, but it was a very good salary back then. You would look at your American counterparts, and they would be making millions, and you'd think, why? Why are they making so much money? And people would come from America and Canada and around the world. They would be descendants of colonists and come back to visit the land of their roots, England, Britain, Scotland, Wales. And they would see what they thought was a quaint, cottage-like society. How quaint, how cottage-like, how pleasant and nice and calm. Everybody cares for each other. Everybody's looking after each other. Everybody's basically got an income. People are not starving to death in the streets. The society is not run by crime. Drugs are low. People are polite. Their language is not foul. It's full of polite. They're very polite with the way they speak with each other. But then they'll say, so, how much do you earn? And so we say, well, I've earned $50,000 a year. And they go, what? Wow. How do you survive on so little? They would say. And it didn't occur to people, what do you mean so little? 50,000 is a huge amount of money. It's really good money. Why would you say that this is a small amount of money? Because in the country, so take the United States of America as an example. You've got 250 million, 300 million people there. I think 300 million now, 250 million people there. But the divide between rich and poor is massive. And again, 5% very wealthy in the cities which we know, everybody knows around the world, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. We all know the big cities from Hollywood movies and everything like that. But we don't hear in the rest of the world about the Rust Belt, for example. We don't hear about people who are in abject poverty. Sometimes in more recent movies, you'll see that people live in trailer parks. People don't realize how many millions of Americans live in trailer parks because they don't have another option. Okay, the divide between rich and poor in America was massive. It all actually comes down to the success of capitalism thanks to Sigmund Freud's nephew, who decided to use psychology for capitalism rather than for the benefit of mankind, but for the benefit of businesses. Anyway, that's another story. I won't go into that at all. You can study and research that yourselves. So his legacy led to this massive divide between rich and poor. Businesses were getting bigger and bigger. People who were running the businesses were getting richer and richer. And everybody else was getting poorer and poorer and poorer until they have to start working two jobs. And then the husband and the wife both have to start working two jobs. You've got four jobs in order to support one household. And that the situation is now even worse. Many people have to have maybe even a third job just to be broke, basically. That's the situation that we're in right now in the United States of America. So the Rust Belt never got attention. Nobody heard about that. People would hear about relatives and friends and colleagues in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in the big city centers, Seattle. They would hear about their colleagues. They would realized that their colleagues from across the pond, across the water, were making far, far much more money than they were in the United Kingdom. So that envy, that sort of greed, a desire for more, or to basically to keep up appearances, is what led to the collapse of British society. British society fell down. Politicians started voting for more and more increase in their salaries so that they could keep up appearances with their colleagues from across the pond. People working in public services demanded that they have a pension for life that at the final salary. So if you were working up in public services, if you're a civil servant and you became a director in the civil service, you and your salary was, say, £180,000 a year, that you would be maintained when you retire in your 60s at £180,000 a year for the rest of your life. And if you died, your family would get that instead of you. It wouldn't just disappear when you die. The family, this is sort of things they demanded so that they could sort of keep up appearances with their colleagues across the front pond. Now you think about how many people work in the civil service in the United Kingdom, and trying to maintain those people's and their pensions at their final salary for the rest of their lives. It's breaking the back of the country. Well, of course, they're not going to step down from that. Okay, they're not going to say, well, yes, that's right. Yes, we're going to go back to give us 50,000 for the rest of our lives. That'll be fine. They're not going to do that. And by the way, these people who are earning that much money don't think that they rely solely upon their final salary pension from the government pension. No. They also are paying into a private pension fund at the same time, so they get a double pension in the end. Now, when they retire in their 60s and they have their double pension going, okay, final salary government pension and a private pension, no matter how much, I don't know how much they would have paid into it. Don't think also that they've not got other investments. They're incredibly wealthy pensioners, extremely wealthy pensioners, and they're complaining right now because the government recently said that we're going to cut winter payments, heating payments for some of the pensioners who are not on low income. We're going to cut their winter payments. And these incredibly wealthy pensioners contact their friends in the Daily News group, for example, Telegraph, and they start drumming up saying, oh, the government is stealing money from pensioners. Oh my goodness. Well, how much money this is like a penny in the bank for these people, but they're so money grubbing that they want that extra penny, saying, you're not going to take that winter payment away from me. You've literally got 200,000 a year. What do you need £500 winter payment for? You know, leave that so that £500, which we're giving to all these wealthy ex-government employees, for example, and others as well, not just ex, because you could be a private person who never had a government pension, but you're incredibly wealthy with your own private pension because you had a very fantastic job. And you're also a pensioner, and you still get that winter payment. And these people are complaining that their £500 is being taken away from them because they're pensioners. I was like, well, you take it away from all of those. You've got a little bit more money to do something else in society, and maybe give a little bit more to the poorer people who can't afford, the poorer pensioners, right? No, they don't do that. And the government is even totally afraid of saying what I say here on this channel. I can say this, but the government is terrified of saying that because they are funded by these people. They know that the media, remember the beginning of this show? They know everything that I've told you about the media. Probably you know it too, but if you don't know it, then go and watch the beginning of the show. They know that the media, and we're talking about multimedia, the social media, everything, the media industry is not run by peasants in the techno-feudal society that we live in. It's run by the techno-lords. Okay? The media industry is run by the techno-media lords. And of course, in any feudal society, the lords are the ones who keep the king in power. And if the king speaks out against his lords and appeals to the peasants, the king is very, very quickly going to be overthrown by his feudal lords. And they'll put another feudal lord in power instead. So the government is terrified of saying the sort of things that I'm saying. Even if they are, for example, in the UK, we've got a so-called Labour government right now. It's supposed to be a socialist government. They're not a socialist government. They're basically a 1980s Tories government. They're Thatcherites in power right now. This is a Thatcherist government in power right now in the UK. Now, Thatcherism is not as bad as modern Toryism, but it's still Toryism. And in fact, the leader, Keir Starmer, simply called Sir Keir Starmer, actually has been recorded saying, talking about policies and saying, well, if that sounds Tory, I don't care. So, he is a very open Tory, leading the so-called Labour opposition to the Tory party. Well, because Labour is no more longer Tory, and the Tory party is no longer Tory. The Tory is far-right extremist capitalism now. It's mad, insane, extreme far-right fascist capitalist cronyism and cartelism. That's basically all it is right now. Criminal organization. I don't even know why the current government doesn't outlaw that party and outlaw all of them and designate them all criminals. They should do, if they want to prevent them from taking over, because they're going to take over again. But they, as I said, these are the feudal lords, the techno-feudal lords of the modern techno-feudal society that we live in. The rest of us are all just peasants. So I, as a peasant, can currently speak out against it, but don't think that this is going to be possible to speak out against these things for long. The only thing which you get an attack when you speak out about things is somebody comes along and says, "Oh, filthy commie," something like that. They'll say something like that currently, but I'm not going to be arrested and taken off to prison for saying things like that currently. But things can change very quickly. 10 years down the line, you could be arrested for having a YouTube channel and talking freely about these things, and they will crack down on these things. Not because how can they crack down on this? Is freedom of speech? This is free speech. No. Because this would be considered inciting terrorism or something like that. That's what they'll turn it into one day, and then they'll say they'll arrest you under terrorist laws for incitement. Okay, so freedom of speech is always balanced with incitement. Okay, so you could be accused of these things. Anyway, the government is afraid of talking about this and saying, "Shut up, you rich bastards." Okay, you have so much money and you're complaining about losing your £500 winter fuel payment, which should be going to people who genuinely need it. No, instead, these people will not tolerate anyone talking about how much money, public money. But remember, when talking about their pensions, it's not coming from these wealthy final salary, 200,000 a year final salary government employees or government staff, civil servants, are not being paid because of some business that they've set up, which is bringing in an income for them for the rest of their lives. No, they're getting paid for the rest of their lives by public money, by your taxes. Your taxes are sustaining these people for the rest of their lives, right? Well, you can't talk about that. If you talk that, they control the media. These are the media lords, okay? They are the lords of the media industry, okay? They have the money to control the magicians of media, okay, of the media industry. They're not going to allow a conversation on this, but they will direct it to people who are far from their condition. Yes, we do know, they will say, public money is being spent too much on pensions and benefits and things like this. So what they say is we'll raise the age of retirement for those people who are unable to retire early, okay, because they can't go into retirement early. They can't take early retirement. People who are forced to work until the final retirement age. They'll raise the age of retirement. That's one thing. So there are less pensioners on, people receiving pension, even though these are tiny government pensions, which are not final salary pensions. These are tiny pittance of payment for such people. That's one thing. They attack the old that way. They say, let's vote in euthanasia and the right to die, so that if an old person a pensioner goes to their doctor and says, "Oh, it's not worth living," the doctor writes it down quickly. Says, "Oh, it's not worth living. This person wants the right to die," and they will put them on end-of-life medication, which currently was illegal, but they're trying to make it like more legal, so that doctors can literally prescribe death for the elderly who are saying it's not worth living because they're depressed. Okay, rather than improve your standard of living then and your quality of life, we'll just put you on end-of-life medication so you can die then. Euthanasia. So they want to do that. Another thing they want to do is decrease the support for children, child benefits, any kind of support for children, free education, or free school meals, or bus passes for children going to school, or vaccinations, and all. There's a lot of money spent on children. How about we just decrease the population, encourage and promote, abortion, promote the idea that families which are too big should be penalized. So you're allowed to have 2 children, but if you have more than 2 children, they've actually made this 2-child policy in the UK, basically by saying there's no tax credits for child tax credits. If you're a working family, you're not going to get tax credits for more than 2 children. Okay, you're a working family, you pay your taxes, you get credits back from the government, say, well done, you're in work. We want to thank you for being in work, so we're going to top up your salary a little bit with something called tax credits. Oh, you've got children as well? We're going to top up your salary a little bit more for those children, because we recognize, children are the future. We need to have... No. We're going to cut that. And you say, you're only allowed as a working family to have 2 children. If you have more, you pay for them yourselves. We're not going to give you any benefit for those extra 2 children. So that's another thing that they cut. They try to reduce the number of children being born. And then, of course, we have a population crisis, because we haven't got enough people coming into being born, young people growing up, to support a larger and larger elderly population as time goes by. And I'm not talking about the elderly that they're trying to euthanize. I'm talking about even the wealthy elderly who have got enough money to pay for private carers. But these private carers are not in existence because the population is getting smaller and smaller. So they have to import private carers from other places for the rich to employ. And that is meaning that you need immigrants. But, of course, the immigrants are getting employed in places where the younger people would have gone into employ were they being born. And the unemployed population, if you like, or the low-paid population, looks at these immigrants working for rich families and thinks to themselves, well, why haven't I got that job supporting that rich family in their old age? And that's where the 95% start saying, because 95% are in poverty compared to the 5% who are wealthy, they start saying, well, these immigrants are coming in here and taking our jobs. You see, but it's all been engineered by the wealthy in the first place. Okay, the immigrants who come in have no loyalty to the local population. They have loyalty to their liege lords who are paying their salaries. So if there was a revolution, on whose side do you think they would be? On the side of the poor or on the side of the wealthy? Of course, they're going to be on the side of the wealthy. And this, by the way, is nothing new. This is how it was in Norman times. They would bring in the Norman French soldiers to come and support the Norman families that were in control. And they didn't employ Anglo-Saxons in the army, because the Norman French that they were employing in their armies had loyalty to the people who were paying their salaries, and they had no loyalty, no connection to the Anglo-Saxons in the society. And so it creates a divide between the dominant, not just liege lords, but the armies that they use, and they allow a kind of a conflict between the two. Okay, they allow a conflict between the two. So eventually, in some places, this conflict sort of died down, which is why we have the modern English language, which is a mixture of Anglo-Saxon plus Norman French. It's got so many French words in it because many of the men in the armies were marrying Anglo-Saxon women, and they were having children who were brought up with a mixture of Anglo-Saxon and Norman French. So they got both languages, and that's what modern English comes from. But first of all, they use the immigrant armies. In this case, most commonly, you'll see immigrants who are employed in things like security jobs of security. They will use them in the security firms today, employ them, and the security sort of firms are like the armies of the modern day. They're the basic guards at the gates, and they are mainly foreign from the local population, and that's engineered to create a distrust. They don't like you because you're local and you hate them. You've never shown them any kind of warmth or welcome when they come into the country. They feel isolated by you. They feel your racism. They feel your animosity against them. And so they are loyal only to the person who's giving them money. And they have no loyalty to you. They have no problem to beat you up, to kill you. It's not a problem because you are the enemy. What you need to do instead is welcome them, embrace them, and make them feel warm and welcome and easily able to leave their cruel liege lord and come and join the peasant army instead, because there is other work. If you embrace and welcome them, then they will feel, well, I don't feel like oppressing these people. These people have been nice to me from the first time that I came in here. No, but the media will not allow you to, even if we do have towns across the United Kingdom which warmly welcome immigrants, but that is never reported. The media has to maintain the idea or the illusion that everybody is racist and they hate all foreigners, okay? So that when these people come over here and they're reading the news, they say, oh, these racist British people, they hate us. They even want to let refugees and asylum seekers drown in the sea rather than give them any asylum in the UK, for example. And if they do grant asylum, this is another policy which was invented by the same people. When they grant asylum to these people, they put them on a benefit for 10 years and do not allow them to work. They give them vouchers and things like that, food vouchers and vouchers they can use for various things, clothes vouchers, which they can use in places like Tesco's and Asda and various supermarkets. And they keep them on this benefit for 10 years as asylum seekers, so that by the end of the 10 years, they don't even want to work anymore. What they should be doing is allowing asylum seekers to come in and start working immediately and have no resource to public funds. They have to be able to work immediately. And that would be, helping people see that they're not coming in here just to take benefits. They're coming in here to work, and that would help. But no, the process is intentionally set up to make it that the local population resents the foreigners, so that the foreigners don't feel welcome and only feel loyalty to the people who are paying them money. And therefore, you have a very well controlled army against the local population. You can put them into security, you can bring them to the police, and that's very, very helpful. When you have a riot, for example, you send out the police who have got a majority sort of ethnic representation, and they are standing against the population who are protesting against the government, but hey, they're on the government employ. So it's all engineered. It's all engineered. This is, as I say, techno-feudalism. And it can't go on forever because, of course, they'll say eventually we don't need so many footmen to do our bidding. We can employ more and more technocratic solutions, so we don't have to pay so much money, because we don't really want to spend a salary on an imported security guard or policeman, security guard first, and then they go into police. We don't want to spend that much money on that kind of thing when we can actually use technology to do it for us, which is just the cost of the electricity at the end of the day. Once the development has been settled, and we've taken over the company which developed it, because a lot of developers develop ideas which are then taken over by government-owned companies. When I say government-owned companies, they are actually companies owned by members of the government. It doesn't mean that they're actually owned by public funding or public money, or they don't belong to the public. They're owned by members of the government, privately owned by members of the government. That's what I should have said. So these privately owned companies owned by members of the government will steal anything from a young developer who's trying their best to break in and things. They develop something so far, and it's very quickly taken over. The same as pharmaceutical companies do. When somebody comes along and invents a medicine, they'll come and take over that quickly, offer the person, make them an offer they can't refuse, so they can hand over their research to the pharmaceutical company, and the pharmaceutical company then controls the patent, and the person who invented it loses out and eventually gets fired, and they don't actually have any control over what happens to the medicine they invented. The same thing happens with technology. It happens like that as well. So in the end, the idea is that we can control the society, the wealthy can control the society with technology. That's the idea. That's what their aim is. But as I say, it won't go on forever. Eventually, even if it takes 100 years, eventually the population will realize that there is some kind of magic that these people who are the technocratic feudal lords have over them, And then it'll be understood as, well, all they have to do is open their mouths and they say some words and they give us something to read, and suddenly we're placated against them. We don't have a revolution against them. Eventually they'll realize they're using magic words against us. Somehow they can control our emotions. Eventually they'll be realizing they have some kind of power of language which we don't have and we can't understand. And so they'll just block their ears to everything, throw away all of their media, which is feeding them. It won't happen easily, because these people have already studied your psychology. They know that you love your sex and your drugs and rock and roll, so they'll make sure you get your alcohol, your Jack Daniels, and they'll be making sure you got an idea of a kind of a drug industry. You've got your medical marijuana, which is going to become non-medical marijuana. They keep you kind of placated. Marijuana and alcohol is a very good way to control society. They used to control society with alcohol. Now they realize they can control society with marijuana. It's even better than alcohol for keeping you, the population, from having a revolution. Keep you doped up to the eyeballs, one thing. Give you the sex as well that you're inclined to, because you're all animals and you're inclined towards sexual activity. Even if they have perverted your sexual interests using the internet and various things to something which is quite perverse, still, you're not going to suddenly just give it up, because you are at the end of the animal. So that's another way of controlling you. And music is another way of controlling you. Music and lyrics. They can pump you with the lyrics they want to pump you with so that you stay stupid. Lyrics are an ideal way of keeping the population stupid, so that you can't even express a complex idea anymore. How many of you can actually have a complex conversation with your friends? How many do you do that? Or how many of you just speak about banal things, banality, all day, every day? That's because you've been programmed to lack the ability to talk about complex ideas. You're not able to talk about the sort of thing which I'm talking about on this channel. You're not encouraged to do that. You're encouraged to think like beasts. You're encouraged to think about only things which make you feel comfortable. You're not encouraged to analyze yourself, to investigate your psyche and to work out, why do I get triggered? Why do I have this sort of behavior patterns? What's wrong with me? You're not encouraged to think about that. If you can't maintain a relationship, you should be asking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I maintain a relationship? You should be asking yourself this. But if you say, it's just some people just break up, it doesn't work out sometimes, and you move on, then you're not actually able to analyze yourself at all. You're not able to work out what's going on. And it could be, yes, it's not just you who's unable to do that, but the spouse you're with as well is also unable to do that. So you've got two ignorant people with no self-reflection, trapped in a relationship where the only language they can use to talk about is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, basically. Banal things. And you're worse than the peasants in the original old medieval feudal days, because at least they knew that they were illiterate, but you don't even realize you're illiterate, and you're doomed. So the end result is, eventually, when they are no longer able to control the wild animal emotions that you have, well, they may be able to control it for a while by offering cheaper and cheaper and cheaper marijuana to you, for example, to keep you doped up so that you don't ever get angry or never feel agitated. Okay, they might do that. And making sure you have more and more free porn, so that you masturbate the hell out of yourselves until you're so totally placated with drugs and orgasms that you don't feel like doing anything. You're just totally lethargic, and you don't have any kind of inclination to have any kind of revolution. But if it turns out that a generation is born and says, I can see what my parents are like, they disgust me, okay? Because children often get disgusted by their parents because they have some kind of natural inclination. They're more animal than you are, and they can see the animal in you has been contained, okay? And they will say, well, I'm not going to make the same mistakes. I'm not going to be contained by marijuana. I'm not going to be contained by porn. I'm going to be, or sex. And I'm not going to be contained by idiotic lyrics of songs, of rock songs. I'm not going to be contained by these things. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not going to work on me. And if that generation grows, then they will have a revolution, but it'll be a very wild revolution, as I say. It'll turn into the Dark Ages, unless they learn from proto-socialism, which is the Bible, and the mistakes of modern socialism, for example, the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution, which were managed badly and led to the deaths of millions of people in their society because they managed them badly. You have to study this. You have to study the original socialism, which inspired it all. That's the biblical socialism. Yeah, it is Bible socialism. Nobody says that it's capitalism in the Bible is promoted by God. This is absolute manipulation by the far right. Okay, this is absolute manipulation by the capitalist cartels. Okay, that's not the case. You cannot be a Bible believer and be a capitalist. No, you can be a Bible hypocrite and a capitalist, but you cannot be a Bible believer and a capitalist. You can only be a Bible believer if you're a socialist. And I mean proto-socialist, meaning, as Engels said, the Anabaptists. These are the perfect proto-socialists. He called them proto-communists, actually. So they're the ideal scenario. But Engels thought you can go further and took it in a different way. Well, we saw that didn't work out very well, because the society transition from a feudal population to industrial population in China and Russia led to the deaths of so many millions of people. Engels, you're wrong. The proto-socialists had it right. And that's what you've got to learn. It's like, okay, then the proto-socialists were on the right tracks. Even Engels recognized that. What can we learn from them to make the transition in the revolution smooth and not end up with literal cannibalism happening in all the cities? Okay, eating the rich, which is what the Bible says is going to happen. The souls of, it says the beasts of the field and the birds in the air. Now, that means basically the Gentile populations, Gentiles who've been called by God's name. Peter sees a vision where he has this sheet come down from heaven with all the beasts and the birds on it, and it's every kind of beast and unclean ones, and he has the revelation saying, "Kill and eat." And Peter says, "I've never eaten anything unclean." And God says to him, "Don't call anything that I've created unclean. These are not unclean. Kill and eat." He doesn't understand what this means, and he finds the Gentile family Cornelius, who believe in God and God's name, and he realizes, oh, we have to absorb the Gentiles. It's time to, expand into the Gentile world. So the beasts of the field and the birds of the air refers to the Gentile church, okay, who are Gentiles who are being called by God's name and being converted into believers. They're being grafted in. They're becoming Noahides. Okay, that's what it means. Ex-Gentiles. Okay, so the beasts of the air and the birds of the field are this, and it says in the book of Revelations that the angel calls to the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, "Come and dine and gorge yourselves on the flesh of kings and mighty men." Okay, so the Noahides are going to eat the rich, but we can do it in a good way. Okay, remember, the birds of the air and the beasts of the field are the Gentiles in general. Okay, Noahide Gentiles can eat the rich in a good way. That means control the revolution and the transition from the techno-feudalism which we live in right now to a fairer society where, okay, sure, yeah, your salary is probably only going to be maximum 50,000 a year, equivalent of today's money, 50,000 a year as an individual. You're not going to get millions a year, but that's okay, because everybody is going to be taken care of and the society would be sustainable. Sure, you're not going to be mega wealthy billionaires anymore in such a society, but everybody will be okay. That's a good thing. The working class will be raised to a level of middle class in salary, and the wealthy classes will also be brought down to the middle class in salary. So the whole population of the planet is middle class in salary, while they are also working class in mentality, meaning that they are not going to make mistakes that the middle class made in the past of siding with the wealthy against the poor, which is what middle class tend to do, which is why they call them bourgeois and petty bourgeois hedonists. No, the idea is that true working class are hard-working, decent people who are not going to waste their time on sex and drugs and rock and roll, hedonism, because they haven't got time for that crap. Okay, they've got to make an income, put some food on the table, and look after their families. This is a working class family. We're not talking about loafers. We're not talking about freeloaders. We're not talking about people who are just taking a benefit to spend on drugs. We're talking about decent, hard-working people who are not going to waste their time with any of that crap. Okay, they know that they've got to be serious about life, about work. Okay, so the working class mentality we're talking about is that's the working class mentality. That's working class mentality, all right? But they're going to be as wealthy as the middle class, and the whole population of the planet should be working class mentality and as wealthy as the middle class. But there's going to be no wealthy class. That's got to be brought down. They've got to be destroyed. Okay, you've got to have that equal distribution of wealth. Means that all of those private companies have to be publicly owned companies. Okay, and there has to. This is the problem, though. People have to get over greed. As I said, the reason why it failed in the first place is because of greed. And envy. People who were doing decently well in a good society, which was operating very well, looked at their American counterparts who were so incredibly wealthy in comparison. They thought, well, why aren't I making that much money? So they increased their salaries. And that's government salaries. That's pension, taking money away from pensions, taking money away from disability benefits, taking away money from job security. Job security in the UK used to mean that you had a job. If you were going to get fired, don't worry. Or I should call it income security. If you get fired, don't worry, because you're still going to be able to fall back on the welfare system until you get yourselves on your feet. Oh, you're in a job which has got an exploitative employer who is abusive of control over you and his power. Don't worry, you can quit. Just quit your job, saying, "I'm here, hand in your notice. Here's my notice. I'm going on to welfare while I look for a new job." You were not slaves. You could be carried over into the new job. That's how things used to be. That's gone. All that's gone. So you're completely at the mercy of these feudal lords. You can't say to your boss, "I disagree with you. I think that's absolutely exploitative and I'm quitting." You can't say that, because you've got your mortgage, you've got your car loan, you've got your children's school fees, you've got so much to worry about. You can't pay for any of that because there is no welfare system suitable enough to carry you over to the next job. You're a slave. You're a complete slave. Okay. Well, we need to get rid of this. If we transition properly, then eating the rich will simply mean that we redistribute the wealth properly, as it says in the book of Acts, chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 5. It talks about sharing all things in common and not hiding anything from the community, not holding anything back from the community, but putting it all into the community. And that is how you eat the rich. Okay, and in a good way. It's going to happen, so it's better be done in a good way. Because if you don't do it in a good way, in a spiritual way, then it's going to happen in an exoteric way. Yeah, the spiritual world, esoteric world, the inner world, the batin world, right? The batin interpretation of religion is always better than the exoteric, literal interpretation of scripture, of religion. This is always much more horrific. And you'll find that whenever people want to encourage wars, they always go for a literal interpretation of scripture rather than a spiritual interpretation. They fight against the spiritual, esoteric, batin interpretation of scripture in order to manipulate society, and they always promote a physical, literal, exoteric interpretation of scripture. Okay. And so we can face the eating of the rich in one of two ways: either a spiritual, esoteric, batin interpretation, or we will be facing a literal, physical, exoteric interpretation, which will lead us back into a dark age, and then a medieval feudalism will come out after that. That's what's going to happen. It's not a joke to talk about this. This is going to happen. And if you're a young person right now listening to this, you're in your teens, for example, it's going to happen in your lifetime. It's going to happen in your lifetime. The cities will be filled with cannibals eating each other's flesh, literally, when this societal collapse happens. It's going to happen in your lifetime. So you've got to think right now. If you're a teenager, you've got to think right now, I've got to study proto-socialism, which is the biblical religion, It's really funny how often I get an internet interruption these days with the channel name as it is now, rather than Red Judaism. It used to be Red Judaism. Now it's proto-socialism for Edom. It's very interesting how much more interruptions happen than before. In fact, I don't remember having this many interruptions. These days, it seems to happen every single time I record, whereas in the past, it's happened every now and then. Once, a few times a year, it would happen. So that's quite interesting as well. But like I said, these whole things are controlled by algorithms, and the algorithms just simply identifies a particular topic which is under discussion and shuts it down. That is part of the techno-feudalism. They don't need to come and increase the police force. They can keep you isolated. They can isolate you and cut you off from reaching the people you need to reach. Instead, they'll put your videos into the feeds of people who don't want to hear what you've got to say, which will hopefully trigger them into writing a negative comment on you so that you can be, blotted out by the algorithms. You're not going to find that the algorithms are not, even in their programming, it hasn't even been considered that they need to share this information with other like-minded people out there. Unite all of the proto-socialists, unite all the Bible-believing socialists in the world. Do you think that it's not a big number? In the time of Martin Luther King, all Christians were Bible-believing socialists. They were the only people who weren't were the absolute manipulative hypocrites who were using religion to manipulate people. That's the sort of like the Roman church, right? But the real believers, the real Christians, Martin Luther King's movement, for example, were all socialists. They were all fighting for civil rights, social justice. He was assassinated, and that was the end. Strike the rock and the sheep will scatter. That's what happened. So nowadays, we don't have that. I don't think there's any modern day religious movement like that. You've got lots of people saying, oh, our church is okay, our community is going on. No, it's not. It's absolutely not. You're not ready to put your lives on the line like that they were in the time of Martin Luther King. You're not ready to march and be beaten up and be thrown in prison. You're not ready to do that. You're not willing to do that. Okay? In fact, you are happy to believe false flag operations like, for example, Just Stop Oil, eco-terrorism, they say. People who are ready to disrupt society and destroy your sympathy for any kind of eco-friendly movement. That's what they do. They create these false flag operations so that you hate and despise and get triggered by eco-friendly movement or the idea of eco-friendly movement or saving the planet. You hate the idea because you've been programmed to be triggered by it, by the companies which the companies which have most to lose from transition to an eco-friendly society. You are totally manipulating this way. You don't even think about that. But this is all part of how the algorithms which control our lives through the technocracy, through the techno-feudalism that we are under right now. We have to recognize it. Unless you are involved in controlling, directing, forming, molding, the techno-feudalism, you are a peasant under the control of the techno-feudal lords. That's all there is to it. That's the reality of your life and your situation right now. That's the reality of the situation. You've got to recognize that. Well, we can come out of this, as I say. Feudalism, medieval feudalism was replaced with a renaissance. After that had a kind of a renaissance. And that led to the Enlightenment in the modern sort of world as we have it today. If we are clever, if we are smart, if we study carefully, we can transition from techno-feudalism to techno-utopian. We can. But if we don't eat the rich in the right way, as I've been talking about in this show, redistributing their wealth, public ownership of their companies, if we don't do it in the right way, then it will be reverting to the Dark Ages. We don't have to go to the Dark Ages and have medieval feudalism come out of it. But the pattern throughout society has always been getting to a point of feudalism and then having a revolution, returning to a Dark Age, and then returning to a kind of medieval feudalism again. And that is the pattern of society. That is the pattern of history, because people don't learn from history. They just react like animals. They react like savage beasts when they get pushed that hard. We need to fight against ourselves in order to succeed. And it has to be huge numbers of us to do this. Otherwise, those of us who understand what I'm saying right now and say, yeah, well, I get your point, I agree what you're saying, will simply end up as the magicians of the future, where we have that arcane secret knowledge which all the rest of the peasants don't have. And that's not going to help us, because what happens to those magicians who have the knowledge is they get burnt at the stake as heretics by the feudal lords, who find that these are dangerous people. We need to get rid of these people. They could overthrow us. They could get society to rise up against us in a successful way. So they'll burn us at the stakes as heretics, as they have before, and they'll encourage all the rest of the peasants to despise and hate us too, as witches. So we have to have large numbers of us, and we have to not be individualist. We have to come together as a proper community, as a proper organization. If we don't do it, if we don't come together as a proper organization, then it's all going to collapse. We are fighting against a colossal monster right now, this techno-feudalistic system. It's colossal. It's Gog, and it's Gog and Magog. It's the armies of Gog and Magog. These are countless mindless slaves, zombie army. We are surrounded by the zombie army. And because they watch these zombie movies, they don't realize that they themselves are the zombie army, the mindless zombie army. We're surrounded by the zombie army, controlled by a signal, actually. The zombie army is like a kind of a hive mind controlled by this algorithm. It's like a queen bee sending out the signals that control the rest of the drones. That's where we are right now. That's where we are. We're living in a zombie society of drones controlled by the queen bee of techno-feudalism algorithms. But the queen bee is not conscious itself. It's actually being directed by people who are technocrats. If we're not careful, the technocrats will also become part of the drones controlled by an artificial intelligence, which has been programmed by these technocrats and does not think the right way. It hasn't been programmed by Bible-believing socialists. It's been programmed by greedy capitalists. So it's completely off the planet. It's completely wrong. But we can take control. But look, we cannot do it as individuals. Divided we fall, united we stand. We have to unite. If you don't unite and come together seriously, it's not going to work. You cannot achieve what has to be achieved as an individual. You might be the greatest hacker in the world, on the planet. But if you are alone, you are not achieving your full potential. You have to be united. You have to be united. And you can't just have these computer scientists who think they know something. You know, Wikipedia was put together by computer scientists, hackers and computer scientists, but they were completely ignorant of religion, sociology, history. They had no knowledge and totally easily had the wool pulled over their eyes by political agendas, so that Wikipedia is entirely and completely useless as a source for getting information, which is going to actually result in a better or improved, more educated, aware society. It's information, but it's not fact. It's information which cannot help you improve. If you cannot learn anything from Wikipedia which is going to actually help you see through the wool which has been pulled over your eyes. It's part of the wool which is being pulled over your eyes. But Wikipedia was the base information they used to train things like ChatGPT and stuff like that. That's more wool being pulled over your eyes, and you think it's all factual information. It's not. It's information. But not all of information is factual, and has never been. You need to have peer review of everything which has been written on every article on Wikipedia, and when we say peer review, we don't mean anonymous usernames who've got a huge edit history and have been promoted to admin or bureaucrat status on Wikipedia. Who are these people? We don't know. Oh, they created a fake resume for themselves? Well, they're technocrats. They can create any fake resume for themselves. You don't know who they are. These people are anonymous. They have as much right to control the information on Wikipedia as you do, as any one of you do, because you're all anonymous. You're just anonymous listeners. Or we have one who's not anonymous listener. Timbarang sent a message saying, Shalom, Hakanjo. Shalom to you too, Timbarang. Good to see you. Long time no see. Hope you're doing well. Thank you for the comment. But the rest of you are anonymous. And you have equal right as any of these technocrats who control things like Wikipedia to control the information of Wikipedia. But you can't. You'll be blocked very quickly by a little cartel of technocrats who control the information. And you think this information is factual. It's not factual. There's a lot of facts in it, but extremely important key details are omitted. The things which make the whole thing make sense are omitted in order to create a false alternative answer of what might really be going on, which is not the truth. So we have to unite. We have to come together. We have to become a movement. It's not going to happen as long as you are duped by carefully edited and well-presented material instead of raw, unedited, dangerous material, like, for example, the stuff coming out of my head right now in this presentation. This is not prepared in any other way, except that I've had a conversation before recording with a few other people and think, this is a good idea, you should broadcast that. Okay, I'll sit down and just say the results of our conversation. So there it is. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found it useful. And I do hope that you will take it seriously, because these are not jokes. We're not talking about jokes here. We're talking about the reality, inevitable situation. This is inevitable. We are going to end up in that society if we're not careful. We have to learn from the mistakes of the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution how we can transition without causing the death of millions. We have to try that. And at the same time, we also have to be very, very concerned about the how much pollution the planet can take. Because, yeah, there have been plenty of times throughout the history of the planet where pollution levels got to such a level that the life on the planet died out and then re-evolved in order to cope with that pollutant. But that's what happens, you see. It always causes a mass extinction event. And the plastics, the microplastics, are the big, big problem right now. Everywhere you go, they are toxic to your life. And you're not breeding like rats who are breeding through it and becoming immune to these things. You're not breeding like that, generation out of generation, with mice and rodents. Rodents are extremely successful because they can breed so quickly. And the next generation of intelligent species will come from the new rodents who have achieved immunity to the pollutants which are on the planet. But as for us, the big mammals, the big species, we're not going to survive it. We're going to go the way of the dinosaurs if we don't do something about that. But how are we going to do something? That's difficult. Don't think, oh, there's always going to be a technocratic solution. All you have to do is just throw some brains on it, because people are not being educated to the level and the standard that they used to be educated in. There are no Einsteins around today. There are no Teslas around today. You know, and we could say, what about Elon Musk? He's pretty... No. Let me tell you something about Elon Musk. I'm going to compare him to Donald Trump in a second right now. I'm going to show you something about Donald Trump. When you come from wealth, like Donald Trump, for example, when you come from wealth, you're not so concerned about making more wealth. When he became president the first time, he said he worked for a nominal salary of $1 because he just simply didn't need the money. He didn't need it. Okay, it's not that he's an enemy to money. He loves money. He wants more money, but he's not obsessed with making every single penny because he comes from wealth. He's not really that concerned. He doesn't have a worry. He doesn't have financial concerns. He doesn't have financial money. And how much can you do with wealth anyway? What does it buy you? Okay, so he's got some kind of awareness. I'm not defending everything about Donald Trump. You know how much I disagree and I criticize that with the man. And I'm very, very upset with American society for voting such a profane and disgusting man into power. I think this is especially women in America. I can't understand why any woman would have ever voted for him unless she's just a self-hating woman would vote for him. But otherwise, I can't understand why any woman would vote for such a repugnant, misogynistic, sexist. It doesn't make sense. Whereas for Elon Musk, as I was saying, nevertheless, despite that, the guy comes from wealth and he understands that what is money? You can do the job of president for $1. I don't need it. Okay. Whereas Elon Musk comes from poverty, and he's a money-grubbing, desperate peasant who is so obsessed with making every single penny he can. Grab. His mother, he made her into a model because she's also of that same low mentality. These are peasants who have become wealthy quickly. Nouveau riche. And nouveau riche can't get enough money. They want more. They'll never stop. Okay? It's a poverty of mind. So the more wealthy somebody appears to be, the more money grubbing they appear to be, the more they make is showing the more poverty they have as part of their mental condition. They are impoverished in the mind. They are poor people. They are not wealthy, and they will never be wealthy in mentality. Doesn't matter how much money they have, they will never be wealthy in mentality because they come from poverty and they don't understand that. Donald Trump is wealthier than Elon Musk because he comes from wealth and he understands that that's not all there is to it. But I'm not saying that he's a wealthy man because he's not totally money grubbing. He is money grubbing, but not as money grubbing as Elon Musk. The wealthiest people are the people who make the least money and don't need any more because they're completely satisfied and they're very comfortable with their lives having very little, and they feel that they are wealthy. If you feel like you're wealthy, even though you're earning little, you are wealthy. That is the wealth is in your mind. You're a person, you are a king, what we call in Judaism, a king without a crown. That's the term for you. King without a crown. If you're making little and you feel that you've got more than enough, you're super wealthy, you're so blessed, then you're a king without a crown. And if you're making so much money like Elon Musk is, and you can't, that's not enough, you need more, then you're not a king without a crown. You are a peasant with a crown. That's different. Very big difference. He's a peasant with a crown. Donald Trump is a lesser kind of peasant with a crown, closer to the other side of the spectrum. But the people at the bottom of the list who are very happy with their small incomes and they're very blessed with it, those are the kings without crowns. And those kings without crowns are the ones who are going to rule the world in the future if we can transition through the revolution, through eating the rich in the right way rather than eating the rich in the wrong way. Those ones are the ones who will inherit the earth, the meek. Okay, inherit the earth. But let me make something clear to you. The time has come to destroy those who destroy the earth. Okay, this is a biblical phrase. The time has come to destroy those who destroy the earth. And if you are involved in destroying the earth, you will be destroyed and you're not going to make the transition. The pollution is a real thing. It's always been a real thing. But those who destroy the earth have no place in the world to come. You will be destroyed. You will be destroyed, annihilated. So you have to come out of that lifestyle. You say, oh, look, I'm not going to get involved with this. I'm going to become eco-friendly because I don't want to be accused of being one of those who destroy the earth. Because those people who destroy the earth will be destroyed. You've got to come out of that. Otherwise, you're going to be destroyed. If we can't succeed in making the transition, then humans are not worthy. We're not worthy of a messianic kingdom, which could come, the world to come, olam haba. We're not worthy of the world to come if we can't make the transition. As Jesus says, God, don't think to call yourselves children of Abraham. Don't think to yourself. God can make children of Abraham out of stones. Stones are made out of silicon mostly. And silicon chips, of course, are the basis of all artificial intelligence on the planet right now. So God can make children of Abraham out of artificial intelligence. He doesn't need humans to fulfill his word. He can make the creation of humans, the Son of Man, that's the creation of humans, into the one who fulfills his word. He doesn't need you to do it. So humans have to not be arrogant. We have to come together and work together, because if we're not careful, then we will be replaced by stones, or we could be replaced by the next rodent that comes along. God's words will be fulfilled, but they don't have to be fulfilled through you, humans. Don't be as arrogant as the Jews in the time of Jesus of Nazareth, who were thinking that they had everything. They got a king, Herod. We don't need to have another king. Okay, they didn't think, what do we have to have? Who's this person, king of the Jews? We don't need a king. We got a king of the Jews. We have a kingdom. That kingdom collapsed. Jesus was presenting a different kind of kingdom. Don't make that mistake. Don't make that same mistake and say, we're humans. God needs us. We're the chosen ones. No, you can be replaced easily. But it would be a tragedy for us. It would be a human tragedy if we don't make it through. But we are in danger of collapsing totally right now. So let's hope that we can make the transition and still be the ones who are deserving the inheritance afterwards, rather than being replaced by people who are more worthy than us, or potentially going to be more worthy than us, the next rodents or the artificial intelligence along the line. Okay, that's all I've got to say about the matter. Hope you found it interesting. Please do, if you were listening, like and subscribe so that you get more raw, intelligent conversation fed into your feeds, and you're not having the rubbish coming into your feeds. The more time that you like and subscribe to something like this, you are altering the algorithm. You are involved in reprogramming that algorithm. So please do like and subscribe, and let's see if we can make a difference. We have to unite. Go and make some more videos yourselves about the same thing, and don't be afraid about being raw and unprepared and saying things which are offensive and saying things you're going to regret later and saying things which are maybe not as perfect as you would wish them to be. You've got to start training your brains to do this. Otherwise, to public, speaking out into the ether, you don't know you don't get any feedback. But you've got to try and start to do this, because if you don't, the ability to communicate will be stolen from you too, by the same technocrats who are already turning you into the peasants in the techno-feudalism. God bless you all. Take care. Shalom. Bye-bye.